And Friday mornings at this time, joined by 4th District Congressman Jim Himes of Greenwich. Good morning, Congressman. Welcome. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Tony. Doing okay, thank you.
It's almost like we say this every week. A week unlike any other we've seen in this country, but seems to just be more and more that way each week, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true, Tony. It is staggering. I mean, it feels to me like we get more events for us to think about and to worry about and be concerned about in a week than we used to get in a month. You know.
All right, but let's talk first of all about something from a legislative standpoint. The PPE that was passed.
Yeah, it's important we mention that because the House a week and a half ago passed a bill that will make the PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program loan program, a lot more flexible. And we don't need to get into the details, but lots of people got these loans. By the way, there's still money out there, so people with small businesses that are looking for some help should consider it, especially now that this bill was passed, because it makes the terms of these loans, most of which become forgivable, much more flexible. So, for example, I'll just give you a couple of quick examples. It used to be that you had to spend the money on wages in an 8-week period, and that was hard for a lot of people because folks don't know how long this sort of economic downturn is going to last. So the bill, which is now going to become law, would extend that period to 24 weeks. There used to be a restriction that you had to spend 75% of the money on payroll. Now that's down to 65%, so you can use 35% of the money for other expenses. Anyway, I don't want to get too into the details, but it is a much more flexible program now than it was. And anybody with a loan should make sure they check out the terms of this new flexibility. And, of course, if somebody was concerned because it was inflexible before, they ought to consider it again because, as I said before, there is still money available in that program.
All right. The House held a hearing on the federal response to the ongoing coronavirus outbreak. What transpired yesterday? Was this yesterday?
I'm not sure because that's not my committee. There is a committee set up, the Select Committee on Oversight of Coronavirus, and they're up and running. And this is all about making sure that the money for the kinds of programs that we just talked about go to the right people, that there's not waste, fraud, and abuse, that kind of thing. One of their first actions, of course, was to do a little investigation of the fact that PPP loan program that we've been talking about, there were some pretty newsworthy cases where some very big companies actually got the money. So, they're on the case, and they'll keep working to make sure that those funds that are designed to help people in the face of coronavirus are used correctly.
All right, let's talk now about the president and his now infamous photo op in front of the church. Some are calling it, and I have a listener left a message saying that can he be censured for something like actions like that, using the police to clear a path for him.
Let's see. Censuring the president is certainly possible. Of course, the remedy against that the Congress has against what they perceive to be presidential misbehavior is more probably about cutting budgets, and in the most extreme, egregious examples, impeachment. But yeah, I suppose that's possible. It's not on the table right now, obviously, because it's the event that catalyzed that I think is really occupying most of my colleagues' attention. I mean, and by the way, I will say the left, right, Republican, Democrat, I saw Uber made a statement, the incredible reaction to the brutal killing of George Floyd that we all watched on video. Has been an enormously powerful thing. And so I think the focus is on, what can the Congress, and not just the Congress, it's going to be state legislatures and cities and towns where an awful lot of the decisions about policing are made, that, hopefully are recommitted to putting an end to what is a drearily regular occurrence. black man being unarmed, being killed at the hands of the police. So I think that's where the focus is, Tony, and I think that's probably appropriate. Look, what the president did drew universal scorn, from Republicans and Democrats alike. It was an ugly moment, and it was a misuse of our military, and clearing what were peaceful protesters was not right. But the focus needs to stay, I think, on the fact that we really need to take steps. I mean, I think this one was particularly explosive because we all saw it on video, but it came close on the heels of Mahmoud Arbery being hunted and killed by 3 men, and of course the Breonna Taylor case where she was innocent and unarmed and was killed. So I think that appropriately, Tony, that's where the focus is.
What's your level of optimism that something will actually get done moving forward?
Well, it's a very interesting, like everything associated with that's an interesting question. And I should say too, it's important to say in these moments, I've watched the response of the police in Greenwich, in Stamford, in Wilton. I've watched the police chiefs in Norwalk, Bridgeport, Greenwich again actually go out there and meet with demonstrators. Chief Heavey of Greenwich, had a long conversation with demonstrators outside the safety facility there in Greenwich. In my opinion, they've done an exemplary job at being open, at being de-escalatory, at having conversations, at listening. That's what's required. And look, I think if, police departments around the country reflect on just this as I said, this drumbeat of killings, and if town and city and state leaderships do that, we will make some progress. I mean, this was just too shocking for people to ignore. But what's hard about it, Tony, is that, we're also talking about the problem of racism, which the country has been struggling with literally for 400 years. That, as we all know, changes way too slowly. You're talking about changing people's hearts. You're talking about changing institutions. And so, the history of this country is one of racism, but also one of very slow, very painfully slow progress against it. And I guess my hope is that it is incidents like this that really accelerate a change in a better direction.
Do you see legislation coming out of the Congress?
Yeah, I do. We're talking about a bunch of things, and I'm not in a position yet to say which I think are good and which I think are bad ideas, but, there's lots of discussion about a federal ban on the use of chokeholds, which, if you talk to law enforcement people, folks will tell you that, that's considered a very controversial technique. It was obviously what was involved in the death of the individual in Minnesota. There's talk about lifting some of the immunities, the legal immunities that exist in for law enforcement officers, preventing them from being sued in cases where their behavior is bad. And so, there are a whole lot of things under discussion. But the interesting point there, Tony, is that, again, just like with education, most of the decisions, the budgeting, the leadership are determined at the municipal and at the state level. So this is really going to be a team effort to make sure that we reduce the levels of police violence.
All right, Congressman Himes, as always, thanks very much, and we'll talk again next Friday, see what the next 7 days brings.